Good morning, wherever you are watching from. It is NBS, your political command center. My name is Mebo Chegumiezake, and welcome to today's breakfast meeting. Now, if you've been following the 90 days of oil and mining, you will agree with me that they've actually been very, very revealing. And if we go back to the discovery of oil deposits in the Albertine region in 2006, the country has since undertaken processes to make sure that they effectively manage this particular fortune, of course, notwithstanding the regulatory contests with foreign companies. And one of the projects that's underway is the East African crude oil pipeline project. It's a $3.5 billion project, and of course it's linking Uganda's oil fields to Tanzania, which is now characteristic of the vast opportunities that we're going to discuss this morning. And John Bosco Habumugisha, the general manager of the National Pipeline Company Limited, is here to talk to us about the regional harmonization and, of course, the contract packages within the East African crude oil pipeline project. So we do welcome you to the breakfast meeting.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here. And good morning, viewers.
All right, so let's probably try to understand the satisfactions with where Uganda is at the processes right now, if we were speaking of this particular project. Yes. And what comes with it.
Thank you. The journey around oil and gas, and as I've been introduced, I'm from the National Oil Company, UNOC, and I'm handling the pipeline development processes under the National Pipeline Company, which is a subsidiary of UNOC. Now, where we are as a country, we've been preparing over a number of years. When we talk about pipelines, it basically refers to what are pipelines for. And the key issue is how soon do we get the oil out of the ground and how do we get it to the international market? So the key issue has been to prepare to get the oil out of the ground. Now, that has been one of the long journeys that we have had to go through. Mm-hmm. And recently, as you're aware, we've been working on negotiations, very critical negotiations that would then lead to production of oil and then consequently transportation through the EACOP, the East African Crude Oil Pipeline. Now, these journeys are complex, given that we are dealing with a project that is in the range of $15 billion in the upstream, which is the oil fields, and $3.5 billion in the pipeline. So what that means is you're dealing with a very complex project for the first time as a country and generally as a region. Mm-hmm. Then in addition, you're also dealing with financing such a project. So there are very many complex issues we have had to deal with. But we are now at a point where we can say we are quite close to a final investment decision. Mm-hmm. That they will then see investments not only in the pipeline, but also in the oil fields. Okay. You know, when we speak of the pipeline, we forget that the pipeline is only $3.5 billion. There is an upstream that is in the range of $10 to $15 billion. Mm-hmm. And these two, one cannot happen without the other. So we need to be aware that actually we are speaking towards 18 or even $20 billion. Wow. And that's how complex the project is. Okay. But we are getting there.
Okay, and we should remind our viewer that this is a 1,445-kilometer long heated pipeline from Kabale to Tanga in Tanzania at an estimated, which he mentioned, $3.5 billion or even over $20 billion. And then 80% of the pipeline being on the Tanzanian side. Yes. Yes. That shouldn't worry Ugandans, I hope. Yeah, absolutely. But at the same time, speak to us about how a businessman should be thinking right now in terms of the work packages, but also the contractual values when it comes to this investment.
Thank you. Now, you're right. The 80% of the pipeline being in Tanzania mm-hmm. should not worry Ugandans. Because the key issue is, what is the pipeline for? Mm-hmm. The pipeline is being built to transport Uganda's crude oil. And therefore, the key benefit for Uganda as a country We're not talking about individuals, the country. The key benefit is the price of the barrel. And that's the driver for this pipeline. So that's why we shouldn't be worried as Ugandans. Now, when it comes to work packages, interestingly, Ugandans have already benefited from the early processes in this project. Last time when I was on air, I talked about engineering. The engineering processes that are ongoing right now, we have companies in this country that are involved in that process. The lead, of course, is a company called Wole, and they're operating from London. But we have at least 2 local companies that are engaged in that process, New Plan and ICS. Now, that's engineering. Now, when you come to resettlement action planning, that process was localized, meaning it was done by a company that is local. And actually, there are 2, the 2 that I've already mentioned. What that means is Ugandans are already benefiting from those packages. And when you talk about resettlement planning for a project like this, the number of people who have been employed already through the 10 districts where the pipeline is passing, we have had employment to local people. We have had to hire vehicles to transport these workers. They needed accommodation, they needed medical, they needed security, and they needed food. So there is already an ongoing process where Ugandans are benefiting from the early work packages. Now, the other packages that are coming, once we finish resettlement, and I should also mention about legal processes. Being a complex project, there are legal firms in this country that are already engaged in the finalization of agreements. And those are also Ugandans. Insurance. There are insurance companies that are engaged in these processes. The challenge with a high-value project is that there is no single local company that can insure this project. So they are working as a consortium. They've put together resources, they've come together to manage that which they can. It's a big pie. And where they can't finish the pie, then they have to work with international insurance companies. You know, there's insurance and reinsurance. So they're working as an integrated system to see how much they can take. But in effect, insurance is ring-fenced, but they can only do what they can do.
Okay.
So it's one of those challenges that if you put all the resources to this project, how do you provide insurance to other sectors of the economy? So they are balancing to ensure that they are able to do both.
Do those opportunities also speak to the same when we cross over to the Tanzanian side for Ugandans, that actually Ugandans will be able to explore from the other side of the pipeline?
Absolutely. There is, we have been working on harmonization.
Yeah,
because there are issues of sovereignty. There are issues that you don't just cross a border and do what you think you can do. Yeah, because then you enter a different tax regime. The work environment is different. The legal framework is completely different. And the sovereignty is key. So we have been working between Uganda and Tanzania to harmonize things like movement of persons and materials. What does it mean to cross the border? Can we streamline that process so that the project is not negatively impacted? Now, when you say 80% is in Tanzania, how much can actually Tanzania handle? So they are aware that we need to work together in terms of joint ventures. And we have told our local companies here to work closely with Tanzanian companies. So there is an association of oil and gas service providers here, and there is one in Tanzania. And the key issue is trying to work together to retain as much value as possible, be in Uganda and Tanzania. Because if we don't, then the international companies will come and do it. And Uganda and Tanzania are not any different when it comes to local capacity. So you don't want a situation where we say, Tanzania, you can't come here, and yet we can't do it alone. And similarly, the other way around.
Okay. We keep talking about the pipeline. And earlier I mentioned the kilometers,
yes,
over 1,000 kilometers. So what are some of those factors that do determine its pipe length when it comes to now the construction of the pipe itself?
Now, construction of a pipeline system involves very many joints. You are taking short pipes. In industry, we call them line pipes.
Okay.
So when we say line pipes, we mean pipes. You're taking pieces and joining them together, meaning you're creating very many joints until you create 1,445 kilometers.
Okay.
So effectively, the fewer the joints you can have, the better. The fewer the joints, the better, because every joint is a cost. And a joint is created by welding. Now, when you talk of welders, you're talking about specialized services. And specialized services are paid for. So you reduce joints, you have reduced actually the capital expenditure that you need for the pipeline. Now, the other thing is a joint in a pressurized system is a point of weakness. So again, from safety and operational perspectives, the fewer the joints, the better. What that means is industry in oil and gas normally would be using 12-meter long pipes. But can we actually use longer pipes? If you use longer pipes, you're able to reduce the number of joints and therefore the cost. You're able to reduce the number of joints and therefore reduce points of weakness. So you have increased your robustness of the system and also reduced the cost of developing the system. Now, what that means is ECOP, we are exploring the usage of 18-meter long pipes. Now, that comes with another challenge of logistics. What does it mean to transport an 18-meter long pipe? How do you handle that through our roads in East Africa? Is it something we are prepared for? Do we have the right trucks? Now, the cost of solving that challenge, when you compare to the gains in reducing the joints, you realize that you're actually making a saving. So currently, we are focusing on 18-meter long pipes to the extent that we are able to solve the challenge that comes with it, the challenge of maneuvering the roads and the bridges, of course. But the indication so far is that 18-meter long pipes, we should be able to solve the challenge of moving them.
Okay. Does that explanation also draw us into the scope of work that is underway right now? Because we would want to understand with this kind of project, firms like Wally Parsons, what kind of work are they doing now?
No, Wally is basically focusing on the detailed engineering process. They have already carried out the initial front-end engineering design. That was done before, and there were other companies involved. So the focus now is beyond the pipe. If the pipe is 18 meters, they factor that into the design and look at all the joints. And then beyond that, they're also looking at pumping systems. It's a heated pipeline. What does it mean to ensure that this pipeline system remains heated continuously?
Okay.
The challenge we have with our oil is if you allow it to cool, like some people say, you're going to have the longest candle in the world because the oil will solidify at room temperature. So you want to keep the system fluid because you have pumps, they pump fluids. So you don't want the oil to solidify. So that's one of the key success factors of this system. You have a robust heating system to ensure that the oil can flow. When the oil arrives at Tanga, are you able to keep it liquid within the tanks? Meaning you have to insulate the tanks so that you can keep the heat. So these are some of the challenges they are addressing to ensure that the system is robust, it can work at the lowest possible cost. And that's really the work they are doing right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
There are people who say that to see is to believe.
Right.
Yeah, so when do we get to see these construction works? How long?
You know, you have asked me a question that I was asked at home. My daughter told me one of the weekends she wanted to go and see the pipe.
Exactly.
Yeah, but you know, even babies take 9 months to be seen. Now, this is a process where you go through a journey. It's like cooking. Before you see the food on the table. So we are at the point where we are quite close to the final investment decision. We are finalizing some of the key agreements that are needed for you to be able to finance this project. We have finished the host government agreement on the Uganda side. We still need the same agreement on the Tanzania side. And that is ongoing right now.
Okay.
We have already finished harmonization, meaning the agreement on the Tanzania side is going to take a short time. They should be finishing soon. Then we have to finish a tariff and transportation agreement. We have to finish a shareholders agreement and other lower level agreements, but key. Then there's also areas of legislation that needs to be sorted out, because this is a transboundary system and it needs to be enabled in the current legislation. So once those are sorted out, we expect to have the final investment decision this year. The assumption, now you get it, the assumption is that we finish these agreements because they are needed by the financiers. So effectively, for us to touch and feel the construction works, we need to have the investment decision, and then we need to go through a financing process. It's a lot of money. This money is not in Uganda. You're talking about 3.5 billion that is not in Uganda. You're going to the international market to arrange this funding. And by the way, there are local banks that are also engaged in that process, including Stanbic, and I think also Stanchart. They're fully engaged in that process to ensure that as we complete the planning processes, also financing is being worked on, that there is local participation in financing this project. Don't forget that when you finance a system, you also make money. So there's also that area in terms of financing the process. So we see construction in the second quarter of next year, early works, in terms of early works. Early works are the things you have to do to prepare for where will the workers stay. So you need camps. Where do you put materials? So you need material yards, these kind of things. But as you might be aware, as a country, we have been working actually. We have built what you will call oil roads. This country has invested heavily in oil roads, which are transformational, not only to prepare for oil and gas, but also to allow the economy in terms of market access. If you have produce in the oil region, can you access the markets? If you have transportation to move anything, can you actually move it quickly? Are you open in terms of reaching markets? So these roads have already been a major investment in the country. With or without oil, these roads have transformed the area where they have been set up. So actually we are already in the middle of developing these projects. It's just that people want to see the oil.
Yeah.
But actually we are in the middle of the project.
Because you called it 9 months of waiting for the baby. Now you're telling us we're already enjoying even before we receive the baby. But as we await to receive the baby, can we say or make a projection and say that ECOP has already anticipated like a country revenue rate, at least maybe of what the country will be getting per day from your projected production rate in terms of revenue?
The answer has two parts. Like I mentioned, the ECOP will have its revenue stream, the pipeline system alone. But for Uganda, the key is the oil.
Okay.
And what you want to see is not to develop this pipeline to maximize profit. You actually want, what it means is when you transport oil through a pipeline, you pay a tariff. Now, assume that you own yourself, you own the barrel. If you want to transport the barrel to a market and sell it at, say, $100, you want to pay the lowest possible transport rate so that you keep the balance for yourself. So the ECOP is being developed not as a high profit project, but as an enabler for getting the oil to the market. So that if, say, you sell a barrel, just an example, as an example, you sell it at 100, and the pipeline is taking the number we know, 12.77, then whatever remains, you can call it your own. Because if you make a pipeline system that demands a high tariff, then you are losing part of your money to an alternative system. So there are two things about Uganda. Uganda is going to make money from the cost of the barrel, less transport. Now, that which remains is what we call, what is shared by the investors in the upstream, of which Uganda takes the bigger share. You have Uganda, then you have the investors, Total, UNOC, UNOC, and in Tanzania we have the TPDC, the National Oil Company of Tanzania. So all these have to look at these revenues. For the Tanzanian company, they're only looking at the pipeline. But those who are in the oil fields in the upstream are looking at sharing what remains after transport. That which remains is shared. So Uganda, that owns a bigger share, wants the lowest possible transport cost. And yet, for you to get that revenue from the barrel, you need the pipeline. So both of them must thrive. So the pipeline system is being developed at a lower rate of return. Let's call it, say, 5%. It's so that you keep the higher value in the upstream and share it with the investors. So there are revenues from both sides. That's why I said there are two answers.
Okay. And speaking of the enabling factors,
Yes.
if we may ask if the pipeline will actually also enable the gas sector in terms of the country's, iron ore reduction process, what are the possibilities that we might use the same pipeline?
Now, this pipeline is being developed solely for crude oil, only crude oil. But then the linkages there are two. One, this crude oil pipeline must be heated. And initially we are talking about heating. You have to take oil off the pipeline system and use it to generate power for heating the system. So it's a symbiotic kind of arrangement. You take oil from the pipeline, use it to generate power to heat the pipeline. Now, if you had gas, you would be having the lower cost in terms of heating the pipeline. You would have a more energy efficient system. You will have a better environmental system. Gas is definitely cleaner than burning crude oil. So when gas is available, we should be able to change over the pipeline heating system to use gas instead of crude oil. And then that oil we are using to heat the system goes to the market. That's one. Now, the other linkage is in terms of the key issue in the long term, infrastructure corridors. This country has a major corridor from Mombasa supplying us with all the logistics that we require. Some of the things we need in this economy come from Tanzania through Dar es Salaam. And now, when you build a pipeline, you have enabled other things. You actually enable the development of an infrastructure corridor. I've already talked about roads. One of the things we had to work with Tanzania was to develop roads so that the logistics of developing a pipeline can be efficiently handled. So what is going to happen is, for you to have a pipeline system, you need roads. The roads are already happening. If we had rail, so much the better. You move larger cargo at a lower cost. We envisage a future where the rail from Tanga is going to be revamped, and that links into Uganda. Now, we also envisage a situation where we can have another pipeline, a gas pipeline from Tanzania coming into northern Tanzania, into Uganda, and who knows, even into Rwanda and DRC. This gas pipeline is already a discussion going on between Uganda and Tanzania. The linkage with ECOP is because you can run the two in the same corridor.
Oh, okay.
You can run them in the same corridor. And that solves a number of logistics issues, because pipeline systems, when you build them, you also need to maintain them. You need roads, you need rail, you need the satellite cities where workers can stay. So what we see in terms of the gas pipeline is a future that is made easier to develop a gas pipeline. This country, if we can have gas availed to this economy, it's going to be one of the key drivers for the middle income achievements, because gas is an industrial driver. And this industry, there is iron ore. Our iron ore is still in the ground because the cost of processing it is still high. When we get gas, then we process our iron ore, we get steel, and the steel goes into construction and other things. So definitely, is there a key issue that we must follow the country? We must negotiate with the region, with Tanzania, even Mozambique, to ensure that we build a gas pipeline.
Okay. Well, 90 days of oil and mining continue, and of course, probably your concluding remarks on the East African, of course, oil pipeline project to the viewers or whoever is watching right now.
Yeah, indeed, the viewers, the 90 days of oil and mining have been eye-opening. Most of us have had the opportunity to understand what's going on and how we participate. I always mention the importance of preparedness. As participants in this industry, one of the things you already know is the key issue of standards. The industry follows standards, mainly because it's a high-risk industry. Now, just to give a quick example about training, as participants, those who are looking at providing skills to the industry, you have to make sure you meet the certification requirements in whichever area you are, whether it's catering, whether it's welding, whether it's equipment operation. Just ensure that you follow the processes of achieving standards and you make sure that you are certified for that purpose, so that as we go ahead, you are not limited in your participation. And then who knows, we work together to keep the highest possible share of this pie in Uganda. I thank you very much, and we look forward to working together in delivering the oil and gas projects for the country. Thank you.
John Bosco Habumugisha, well, thank you so much. He's the General Manager of the National Pipeline Company Limited. And of course, we were talking about harmonization and contract packages in the East African crude oil pipeline. You should remember it is a $3.5 billion project. Well, you're still watching The Breakfast Meeting. My name is Mebo Twegumiezake. I'll return shortly after a short break, especially if you want to reap big from the Liquid Telecom Customer Appreciation Week. Well, this morning belongs to you.